I built up walls like mansions to the sky, protect my heart so it would survive. But you climbed in like no one else could do. The day I knew I needed you, I was drifting out, safe from any shore. Didn't want to get hurt anymore, but you pulled me in like no one else could do. The day I knew I needed you. I was complicated, you made perfect sense. I was slowly breaking, but you knew how to mend. We're searching for some answers, who I was and where I'm running to. I was looking for, I was complicated when I found you. When I found you. When I found, felt familiar the moment that we met. Tried to block it out so I forget. Your persistence kept on pushing through. The day I knew I needed you. I was complicated, you made perfect sense. I was slowly breaking, but you knew how to mend. We're searching for some answers, who I was and where I'm running to. I was looking for me when I found you. When I found you. You saved me, changing my direction. I'm falling into our connection. I was complicated, you made perfect sense. I was slowly breaking, but you knew how to mend. We're searching for some answers, who I was and where I'm running to. I was looking for me when I found you. When I found you. When I found you. When I found you. When I found you.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive. With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head. With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head. Just like a seed in a garden, you will grow to be tall, staring out over miles of land without it, but wanting to build up walls. Lift me up in your branches, we can watch the sunrise.
is shining 24/7. 'Cause when we're together, it feels like we're in heaven. If it will get dark, you'll be my million stars. I know I can lean on you. Ooh, you catch me like a leaf falling from a tree. If I'll be a shooting star, you make a wish. No, I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table 'cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good. When I wake up in the morning and I see your face, I'm becoming blind by your dazzling grace. What a beautiful feeling to be close to you. There's nothing else I wanna do. Ooh, and from the fields of flowers you chose to pick me. You're spreading sugar on my misery. And I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table 'cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good. And I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good.
Well, good evening, everyone. How you doing? My name is Lee Love, and this is Photo Mentor TV. And glad you're here this evening or watching on the replay, either one. We are here every Friday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you want to join us live, we always love having you here, answering your questions. The purpose of this broadcast is really to educate, encourage, and mentor new photographers primarily. Give you straight answers to some of your questions and basically help you to grow as an artist. That's the whole purpose of what we do here, and we do it every Friday night, as I said. Again, you're welcome to join us. We are on Facebook and YouTube, and starting this week, tonight, we are now on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, that's we're excited about that, a whole new audience for us. And anyway, so glad you could join us. Tonight we got some interesting stuff. We're going to do some fun things, I think. Some trivia questions or quizzes on photography. I think you guys will have enjoy that. It's we've done it a few times in the past, and it's been a lot of fun. We're continuing to improve it, and we'll be adding some more new features to it here in the next couple of weeks. Going to try and do it maybe once a month, I think, is the idea. Anyway, again, if you're first time here, then let you know what we do. We do a couple of things on the first Friday of the month. We do photo reviews, by the way, so if you're not didn't know about that. And you're welcome to submit your work. Every first Friday of every month we do this, and the idea is to help give you really advice on improving your work. We do it, it's anonymously, so therefore no one's embarrassed. We encourage you to submit your photos. Doesn't matter how long you've been shooting, whether you're a brand new photographer or you've been shooting for a while. And it's not about whether I like it or not. It is about how it works artistically and technically. So I'd love to have you join in that if you're interested. Also, if you're on social media, you can join us over there on Facebook if you're watching there. We also have a YouTube channel. And the way you get there is through, the best way is really to get there through through going to facebook.photomentor.tv, or if you want to get to the YouTube channel, you can go to youtube.photomentor.tv. And of course, now that we're on LinkedIn, if you're a LinkedIn user, you can also watch us on linkedin.photomentor.tv as well. So anyway, I think that's all of the housekeeping, if I'm not mistaken. We also, by the way, I should also mention we have a Facebook group. If you're interested in joining the Facebook group, you can go and fill out the application to photomentor.tv/join. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that we also are in the midst of launching Photo Mentor Academy. PhotoMentorAcademy.com is a place you can go where we're going to be doing what we do here, but in much, much more detail and in-depth education, one-on-one training, as well as group coaching. So that's keep an eye on that if you're interested in participating. Where it's the situation right now is we're about a week behind. I don't know if I told you guys or you were aware that my good friend Frank Ruggles passed away last week. And he was an amazing photographer and a great friend. And so that really upset me and was difficult to deal with, and dealing with his death and a number of other things. So anyway, that put me behind on what we're doing, but that's okay. So we're going to be doing some more work on that this week. So anyway, if you want to go to photomentoracademy.com and fill that out, we're going to be doing a soft launch. In other words, if you're interested in participating in the beta. Now, I'll tell you, there's only going to be a handful of people that are going to be included in that, and most of those people are people I've already been working with for over a year. But go ahead in there anyway. Again, if you want, photomentoracademy.com, put your name and address, or name and email in there, and we'll keep you posted on what's going on. But that's going to be pretty exciting. We've been working on that for quite a while. And looking forward to that. I think you guys are going to really, really like what we're doing over there. Let's see. What else? I think that's about it as far as the housekeeping stuff. Tonight we're going to be talking, we've got two things going on. Primarily I'm going to, talk to you a little bit about creating a story and how to use story in your photography. And then the other thing we're going to do is some fun stuff, and that's going to be the trivia and the quiz. So I think you guys will have a good time with that as well. So anyway, I'm looking forward to it. It's some easy questions and some hard questions. So anyway, let's see here. So first thing I want to talk about is the idea of creating story. Story is very, very important in our photography. In fact, it's probably one of the most important things. Story is the background. Story is what gives our photography context. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about this because that's not the point. But what got me started about this is I made a comment on one of the Facebook groups about a photo. It wasn't about the photo specific. It was about the concept of photographing people in an environment that had no context. It didn't have anything to do with the people. It so happened that the family was standing in a field, an empty field. And I've seen this over and over again in many groups. So was not specific to this person or this particular image. And in fact, I've commented on it before. And I'm confused by it, quite frankly. I don't understand, because when I approach a photograph, creating an image, one of the first things I want to do is help tell a story. I want that story to convey something either about the person or about the environment or, something like that. I mean, that's part of the image. It's part of the frame. You want to use every part of that frame to either enhance the story or take away from the story, or not take away from it, but eliminate it so it doesn't take away from the story. So I was really kind of confused in this. A lot of people didn't understand, and that's fine. They attacked me about it. And I don't care about that part, because I'm really more concerned about you guys. I want you to become better storytellers and better photographers. So I'll just kind of give you a little bit of background on myself and some of the things. I do a lot of magazine work, and they'll send me either, I'll find out whether the story's been written ahead of time or it's not. Sometimes they're still working on the story. But the first thing I want to know is who's the person, what's their background, what's the story about, so that I can shoot to the text. I want to know that the photos are going to reinforce what the story is about. So to do that, the first thing I do when I go into a situation, I try and go in with a couple of ideas ahead of time. But the first thing I do is I look for background. Where can I photograph them against a background that will help tell that story, that will help reinforce that story? So, for example, I was doing a shoot. I was on assignment for doing a person that was an author. And he had worked in the White House as an assistant or some role in the White House. I forgot what it was right now. And he wanted to meet near his home somewhere to do the images. So there was a little place nearby. I knew where he lived. He told me where he lived. And there was a place there where some water, a lake. And I knew there was a set of shops that were nearby as well. And one of the shops was a used bookstore. And so I got there early and I went by the bookstore and I told him what I was doing. I was wondering, would it be okay if I came over here later with this gentleman and took a photo or two? And and they said, sure, no problem. So I did the photos outside near the lake, and that was fine. And then afterwards I took them into the bookstore and did a couple of images there. I should have one here. I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't have it in front of me. Wasn't planning on telling the story. But the point was, I was looking for something to help reinforce the fact that this guy was an author. The first photos were nice, him sitting on a bench near a lake with some water behind him and stuff like that. And it was a nice image from a technical standpoint in that perspective, but it didn't say if he was a sailor maybe or a boat, but he wasn't. And so the image that the magazine ended up using was the one that I submitted I submitted both of them, but the one they used was the one in the bookstore. Again, that put the gentleman in context. It told something about him. He surrounded all kinds of books around him. And so you kind of knew something. He was either a writer or author or something to do with books if he's in a bookstore. So it's the same thing with your photograph. I don't care if you're photographing a family or a senior portrait or whatever. Try and find out something about the person. Try and help and include that in your image to tell, whether it's a prop, whether they're holding something in their hand, whether it's the background. But use that background. That background is incredibly important in conveying your story and making your image compelling. So don't lose sight of that. And I think many people do. So I'm going to share a quote with you. This is a quote that says, "Stories have been shared in many cultures for millions of years." Okay, starting with the rudimentary drawings by people who lived in caves and as means of entertainment, education, cultural preservation, and instilling moral values. So story is part of who we are as people. we relate to stories. Stories are what connect us to each other. And in fact, before mass communication, that was the only way that you had to communicate and pass stories on from elder to elder. If you look at all of our entertainment, it's all based on story. Have you ever been into a movie and walked out and go, wow, they had really good special effects, and that was about the only thing you could remember about the movie? Or one that had a compelling story and you were crying or emotional or whatever when you left there going, wow, that was just an amazing movie. And it wasn't probably because of the cinematography, while that might have had something to do with it. It had to do with the story. So I would really encourage you guys to be more aware of the story. Try and make that more of your, what you're focused on when you do take a photo, when you're looking at when you're looking at creating an image. Again, remember, we're not photographers that take pictures. We're photographers that make pictures. That means you have to be conscious about every aspect of what you're doing, and the background and the story is part of it. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I want to share something with you. One of the things, a process that I've developed that I teach my students is called S.T.E.P. And the reason I bring it up is because if you look at it, it goes in order. See, tell, expose, process. That's the way I teach my students. And if you notice, expose and process are the second and third item there, or third and fourth item. The first two items are to teach people how to see, and the second one is to tell you how to tell a story. What I find, and the mistake a lot of people are making, is they focus on the exposed part. They focus on the camera first. Oh, I have to learn the exposure triangle. I have to learn this. I have to learn that. And that is absolutely the wrong way to learn photography, in my opinion. It was fine when we were shooting film. You had to know how to use that exposure triangle so you didn't get just a black piece of film out of the camera at the end of the day. But nowadays, while it's important, it's not the most important, and it's not the first thing you should be learning. An image or a photo that moves somebody is done through storytelling, not through the camera settings, not through putting fancy filters or presets on an image. It's probably not the most elegant way to say it, but I see a lot of photos that people, what I call, they put lipstick on a pig. Okay, the images are not that great, but they think by putting some fancy preset on it that they've gotten from Lightroom, all of a sudden it's going to make it artistic. Well, it doesn't make it artistic. It just makes it different. It's about composition. That's what makes an image artistic, okay, and makes it compelling. And a story, of course. And you use all those elements to do that. So anyway, I don't mean to go into too much detail, but it really is annoying sometimes to see when new photographers are so focused on the wrong things. They're focused on the cameras, they're focused on the the technology, and not on telling a story. I don't care if you're using a phone or a camera, a DSLR, it's all about the image and it's all about the story. So anyway, hopefully that helps a little bit and you guys understand what the purpose of that is and why it's so important. Because without that, it's just a snapshot, quite frankly. Okay, so enough of that. Let's move on. Let's get into some other things here. First thing, let's see if we have any questions from anybody that has, before we move into the, so good evening, Dean. How you doing? So Dean Rhodes is, always like to see Dean in here. And thanks for joining us. Hi to you too. Hope you had a good week, and it's going to be a good weekend for you. I know Sue Ann is looking to go out boating. I think she was telling me weather's going to be nice. Boat's all gassed up, ready to go. So she's caught a water nymph, I believe is what I can tell. So anyway, so I think she loves the water. So anyway, so Dean, thanks for joining us. Again, any other questions you guys have, you can leave them on the comment section on YouTube or Facebook. Again, those URLs are youtube.photomentor.tv. And that's also our facebook.photomentor.tv. And that's where you'll leave your answers, by the way, for the quiz that we're going to do right now. All right. So there's 10 questions tonight we're going to go over. And the first one is, I think you guys will like this. Let's see here. The first one is, and I've tried to mix these up a little bit. All right, I don't. So some of them you're not going to get. If you get some of these answers, I know you're cheating. I know you're Googling. So no Googling. Okay, no Googling. You got to try and guess. Just guess. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. And it's not a big deal here. We're having a little bit of fun. It's not you're not gonna. It's not a passing grade. Okay. So all right. So let's try one of these. So the first one is, let's try this one here. Okay. So the first one is which f-stop is the largest aperture? A, f22, B, f32, C, f4.5, or D, f2.0. So you guys have 30 seconds to leave that in the comments, okay? So Dean says it's he left his answer in there. Anybody else want to give a guess? A, B, C, or D? No wrong answers. Well, there's a wrong answer. Hey, Carl, good to see you. Carl says D. Dean says D. Let's see here. I'll give you guys a little more time. Sue Ann says, Sue Ann believes Dean. That's probably a pretty good idea. All right. And, all right. So, okay. So, time's up. The answer is D. You guys are good. All right. Largest aperture. And the reason that is true, by the way, I'll show you here. Okay. The reason that is true is because the aperture, of course, is the opening of the lens that allows the light in. So while f32 or f22 is a large number, it's actually a smaller opening in the amount of light that it lets in. So the question was not a trick question, but the answer would be, it is which f-stop is the largest aperture. It didn't ask what the largest number was. It asked what the largest aperture was. So that would be f2.0, which is really, by the way, a beautiful lens. I have a 200 millimeter f2.0, and that thing is just gorgeous. I don't really shoot at anything other than 2.0. It's just so nice at that f-stop. Okay, so good going, guys. Nice job. Okay, so the next one is, let's see, the next question is, okay. The next one is, what is the rule of thirds? Is it A, a proper way to carry your camera? B, guideline for proper exposure? C, imaginary grid of 9 parts using composition? Or D, placing the subject on the left or the right? So you got 30 seconds to answer that one. I got to get some music going here, Sue Ann. I need at least some clock sounds. I'm still, I tell you, it's we're working on an automated system to help with this, and it'll make my life a lot easier once that gets done. So A, B, C, or D? Proper way to carry your camera. B, guidelines for proper exposure. Imaginary grid of 9 parts used in composition. Or D, placing subject on the left or the right. Carl says D. Dean says C. Okay, so the answer is, let's see which one this is. This is, the answer is C, but I would sort of accept D as an answer, because it's kind of a trick question. By placing the subject on the left or right, you really are using a rule of thirds. You're placing the subject to, you don't want to put them in the middle generally. So it's kind of, again, a little bit of I could easily see where D could be almost right. C is more right, but D is also right. So we'll give you that one as well, Carl. That one would also be correct. Okay. Good going there, guys. Okay, the next one is what of these make up the exposure triangle? A, shutter, ISO, and megapixels. B, ISO, white balance, and auto mode. C, shutter or aperture, shutter, and EV or exposure value. Or D, shutter, aperture, and ISO. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. And I need to watch the YouTube channel because you guys, my clock's there's a little bit of a lag there. Okay, great, cool. And so the correct answer on that one is also D, shutter, aperture, and everybody got that one right. Way to go, guys. Good move on that one. And of course, the reason that is true is because, did I do this wrong? I didn't. It was because, oops, yeah. I think I skipped one there. Oh, I see. Sorry, guys, I missed one. I didn't give you guys the explanation on the rule of thirds. Let me go back to that one real quick. So the rule of thirds, of course, is a way to frame an object, resulting in a much more visually image. Now, it's interesting. It's a guideline. It's not really a rule. We call it the rule of thirds. And you can see by placing the object on the right, as I was kind of alluding to, or that it could be considered, and that's why I said a D could be a correct answer. But it's just the way the brain works. They call it a rule, but it's a guideline. There are times when you put something right in the middle, and of course, especially when you're trying to do something symmetrical. But generally speaking, if you place an object on the left or the right and you put it in where one of those 9 locations cross, as you can see here with the surfers right in the middle, that is generally a more appealing image. And of course, because the reason is your eye is led from the empty space on the left into the subject on the right. And so that's just the way, at least on the West, we look left to right. And so in this particular case, that would draw your eye directly to that. And of course, the shadow at the bottom also helps and make that enhancement. So anyway, sorry about that. We kind of got one behind there. So the answer to this question, of course, is exposure triangle. It's made up of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And it's interesting because this is people post this chart over and over again in Facebook groups. People ask a question, what's wrong with my picture? It's overexposed. And they'll post this image or something similar. And honestly, this is more confusing than anything I've ever seen. It doesn't really make sense. And in fact, if you do some research on it, there's a number of people that say it's not really a triangle. The exposure is not really symmetrical like this. I guess it would be a quadrat. What is it called? Anyway, I can't think of what the term is. Where they're parallel sides there. So there's a lot of discussion about whether it's really an exposure triangle or not. And so, but anyway, so the concept is that they interrelate. That if you change one, you have to change the other. So if your shutter speed, let's say, is at 1/25th of a second, and your aperture is at f8, and your ISO is at 400, and you want to make a change, let's say you want to go to a wider aperture. So from f8, let's say you want to go to f5.6. If you do that, you're doubling the amount of light that would come into the frame, into the sensor or film. So therefore, you would have to speed up or either the shutter speed or slow the ISO down. I guess not really slow. Let's make it less sensitive. So if you were on 400 before, ISO and shutter speed of 1/25th, and you want to go from f8 to f5.6, you would have to either go down to 1/250th of a second if you change the shutter speed, or you could leave it at 1/25th and change the ISO from 400 to 200. So that's why they call it a triangle, because they relate 1-to-1, generally speaking, almost. And if you change one, you have to change the other. Otherwise, you're going to have an overexposed picture, which is actually the problem. Why new photographers start off with these images and then they can't seem to get it right, and their pictures are either underexposed or overexposed, and that's because they're having to adjust three different features of the camera. And so that's my point, is that if you shoot on aperture priority or even auto or program or anything else, and let the you pick one of those and let the camera pick the other two, or at least one of the other ones, then that frees you up to worry more about composition and not have to worry about the technical aspect of the camera. I won't get into this, but if you watch any of the other episodes, I talk a lot about the left brain, right brain, and how aperture, shutter speed, ISO, inverse square law, all the technical stuff is really a left brain function. It's real technical, it's analytical, it's not artistic. And where the artistic side comes from the right side of the brain, where we're talking about emotion and music and things like that. So the goal of a photographer or any artist really is to try to diminish, you get set up, you get your camera set up, but then you diminish that, or you set that aside and you try and focus and learn to see and tell the story, as I was talking about before, when that will help shift you to focusing more on the right side of the brain, which is where your creative juices and creative aspects going to come from. So that's the whole idea there. So anyway, okay, let's go to the next one. Hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm having a good time. Hope you are. Okay, so the next one is, what is the size of negative for the biggest camera ever made? Now, nobody's going to get this. It's okay. You don't have to get it. But this is just to kind of educate you as well. So is it A, 3 feet by 6.5 feet, B, 8 foot by 4.5 feet, C, 4.5 feet by 6 feet, or D, 9 foot by 6 foot? Which do you guys think it is? Again, it's a guess. Nobody's going to get this. If you get it, then I know you're Googling it to look it up, because it's not easy to find, actually. It's interesting when you start looking this stuff up, how, how the kind of conflicting information is really about some of this stuff. All right, so is our time is up? I think it is. Okay, A, B, C, or D. So the answer to this one, and again, let me see if anybody guessed right. So complete guess. So that's okay. So A? Dean says it's A, and again, nobody knows. It's really kind of, and Carl says C. That's a pretty good guess. And the answer is actually B, but it's again a trick question. And the reason is because, and I know Carl must have looked that up. The reason it's a trick question is it's not really fair, because the largest camera that was ever made was made in 1900s. And it was 20 feet long and weighed 1,400 pounds. But the thing I really loved about it was the lens. See, I got some typos in there. The Carl Zeiss lenses that were used, there were 2 of them that were made for it, and they're the largest lenses ever made. One was a 1,676 millimeter wide-angle lens, and the other one was a 3,048 millimeter telephoto lens. But it's really kind of interesting. But what I wanted to show you about that, and why I think it's interesting, is that also, did I not bring this? Where's the video? The other one here. There's also something I want to show you guys. There's a guy that has developed a camera that's not quite, the negative's not quite as big, but it's on a trailer. And this is something he had done a few years ago. This guy's a commercial photographer. And I think this one is the next one, Carl. This is the next size. Or Dean, you would have gotten this one right, I believe. I think this, and the negative is inside the camera. It's pretty amazing. It's worth looking up. And the negative is like 6 feet by 4.5 feet or something. the prints can be 2 stories tall, and it's just a phenomenal camera. The lens I remember looking up weighs over 200 pounds, it's just an amazing setup. So definitely something worth looking into. Kind of fun to see, and check that out. The guy's name is let me bring that up for you. I think I have it here. It's Dennis. I'll put it in the notes here in the comments section, both in the Facebook and in YouTube for you guys. But it's pretty cool. So I found it really, and he was showing a picture of the negative of a 2¼ inch negative, medium format negative, and it's this negative, this resolution is 1,000 times higher resolution than a medium format. He's talking about the eyelashes and the different shades of gray you can see in the eyeball with this camera. Pretty impressive setup. So anyway, pretty neat. I thought it'd be kind of fun. I thought you guys would enjoy that. I did. I thought it was pretty neat. Okay, so let's keep moving on here. The next one is okay. Oops. So the next one is, and this is also a tough one, and there's also some controversy around this one. What year was the first color photograph taken? Okay, 1861, 1848, 1901, or 1891 by Thomas Edison. So 1861 by James Maxwell, 1848 by Edmund Beclure. I don't know, he's a Frenchman. I'm not sure the name pronunciation. 1901 by William Bentley, or 1891 by Edison. So Dean says C. It's a good guess. And let's see. No guess, huh, Carl? Carl's Googling. That's what he's doing. I know Carl. Okay, the answer to this one is, I think I know what it is. I'll make sure I got the right. I want to give you guys the right answer. When I was doing these, this is, okay, yeah. So this one, okay, that's right. This one is really A. James Clerk Maxwell. Now, it's kind of a trick question because in some ways it could also be B, and I'll tell you why. The first photograph that was ever taken, color photograph, was taken in 1848. Oh, I think that was one of the answers. I hope it was, yeah. Oh, it was B then. The answers are B. I'm sorry. So the reason it's two answers is 1848. This is the first color photograph. It was really more of a scientific experiment to see, and if you can see, the only thing that's color there, it looks like maybe a strip that you could do in Photoshop or something, and that was considered a color photograph, and it was a very time-consuming method for doing that. But the one that I think is probably most of us would consider a real photograph was the one in 1861 by Thomas Sutton. And this is really where more of a modern kind of a setup where he used different filters. He exposed the film through red, green, blue filters and then put them together. And that's how he created a color photograph. So that one's a little more, I think, modern compared to what we're, so to me, but what happens is if you search it, you're going to find both of these. In fact, I think I might have even found a third example where someone said they thought a color photograph had been made, but I'm not sure that was true or not. So anyway, so again, that one's kind of a tough one. I know it's, don't expect you guys to get that one, but thought it'd be kind of fun just as an educational lesson there to kind of teach you a little bit about color photography and how long photography has really been around, which has been quite a while. Okay, let's do another one here. Okay, so the next one is, you guys are experts. You'll be able to get this one. So shutter speed controls. All right. So the shutter speed control, the exposure time, A. B, focusing speed. C, flash exposure. Or D, none of the above. What do you guys think that one is? Carl says B. Dean says C. Is that right? Is that the one you guys are? Okay. Oh, Carl says D. Okay. Yep. This one's a little bit confusing as well. I kind of tricked you guys a little bit on this one. All right. All pens down, please. Okay. This one has to do with the shutter speed controls is A, exposure time. So it's interesting about this one because most people could think it would be C, okay, but the reality is that shutter speed has no control, no effect on flash. What happened? You can be in a room, and I've done this many times, where you are, like I'll go in a conference room to do headshots or something for a corporation, and they're like, "Oh, we got these fluorescent lights on. We can't get rid of them. We're sorry. Is that going to be a problem?" The answer is no, because if I go and shoot a 2/50th of a second, for example, at ISO 100 or 200, the room will be completely black, because the shutter speed only affects the ambient light when using flash photography. Now, you turn on your flash, you bring the exposure up to whatever you want it to be, and it's going to be the same. So I could change the shutter speed from 2/50th of a second to 30th of a second, and the exposure on the person with the flash is going to be exactly the same. Now, I say exactly, meaning what's going to happen is the ambient light is going to come up. All right, you're going to get more room light, but the flash will be the same. The only way to change the power of the flash is either change the flash power, of course, or to adjust the aperture. And then that would change the setting on the power of the flash. But shutter speed has no effect on the output power of a flash, only the shutter speed. Only the ambient light. So again, shutter speed is the amount of time that obviously the shutter is open. So a flash shutter speed creates a shorter exposure, okay, as I just described, and the amount of light the camera takes in, and the slower shutter speed creates a longer exposure. So Dean asked a question. Dean says, whoops, not the right one. So Dean says that shutter speed controls ambient light with flash. That's correct. So it has no effect on the flash photographer. So let's say, for example, again, in a situation where I'm photographing something, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to look for the background. I mentioned that earlier. Okay, that's in telling the story. The next thing I'm going to look for is the light. I don't start with light. I start with light is second, because the background is more important, because I'm bringing my own lighting. I can either use the lighting that's there, if I'll try to use it if it's there, or I'll supplement it with my own lighting. But if I want to include that in the background, then or make it less dramatic, in other words, balance it, more of a 50-50 lighting ratio, then I will lower the ambient light or lower the shutter speed, and and that way to bring, I'm just trying to look for an example here. Let me see, I'll show you. Lower the shutter speed, I will, and as far as, and that way I can bring in more ambient light. Let me show you a photo here real quick. I think I have one. Maybe I don't. I don't know. I probably can't find it quick enough. Sorry. I was going to show you guys a photo of one that I've done outdoors many times, where I balanced the daylight and the flash, and so it doesn't even look like it's lit, but it is. And so a lot of people think it's not lit, but I was going to show you an example of that. I didn't think about doing that before. Apologize. I don't see it here. Oh, well. Anyway. I'll try and remember to do that if possible later on. Anyway, so the thing is, so if you're trying to mix your amp, so in other words, let's say you're doing a birthday party or an event or some kind, and you don't want people, I don't like that flash look. Well, then lower the shutter speed a little bit or turn the ISO up a little bit. That'll help some. Lower the shutter speed. That'll bring in the ambient light, and then turn the flash on, and then bring that flash up just enough to fill in the shadows, and therefore then you have a little bit more of a mixture. Now, in a low light situation, you'll get blur if you're not careful, motion blur, so you probably want to bring that flash up a little bit. But the point is, what freezes an image with flash is not the shutter speed. Okay, that's what people think, but it's not. It's the duration of the flash. How long? So here's the analogy I use. What's the shutter speed setting to photograph lightning? Anybody know? There isn't one. Lightning's so fast it wouldn't matter. What do? You put your camera up, you set it against a dark sky, you open the light up, the shutter open, okay, in a bulb mode or something like that. It's open, the lightning goes off, you close the shutter. You capture the lightning. It's the only way to do it. It's the same thing. Lightning and strobes work exactly the same. So what you're doing, you could be in a completely dark room, 100% dark, open the shutter up for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. You may get some noise, but you're never going to get anything that show up on the sensor. Hit the flash, you'll expose the subject, and it'll go off. It doesn't matter if it's open for 1,000th of a second, as long as it's synced up, of course, or it's open for 2 minutes. It's going to be the exact same exposure. Let's see if this. Dean says, for example, for doing portraits outside and exposure, you expose for the sky, adjust your shutter speed to allow the sky for ambient, and set flash for subject. Absolutely. That's exactly the way you do it. And most people don't do that. And so they get blown out skies, and they don't understand why. They think they got to go into Photoshop or work in RAW and fix it. No. So the thing you do is, especially if you have a manual flash, here's one technique. Again, let's say you want to figure out what aperture you want to shoot. Let's say you want to shoot wide open, f8, whatever. Set it on f8, f5.6, it doesn't really matter. Aperture priority is one way to do it. Or you can do shutter priority. Take a photo, look at the back of the screen. Is the exposure correct or not? If it's not, make an adjustment to get the exposure correct for the sky. Then, one of the few times I tell people to go to manual. Go to manual mode, dial in at exact same settings. F8 at, let's say, 1/25th of a second at ISO 100. Let's say that's the exposure that you got when you want aperture priority. You put that into manual, the picture will be exactly the same. Nothing's going to change. Then you can, if you want to darken that background, go from 1/25th maybe to 1/60th of a second. That'll bring that background darker a little bit. The sky will bring, if it's got a blue sky in that day, bring nice rich blue sky. Then turn on your strobe, as Dean's saying, and then dial that up or down base to get the proper exposure on the individual or the person or the subject you're photographing, and you'll get a really nice dramatic image. If you want to balance that and you don't want it to be too much, then you would just keep that exposure about the same. Maybe, as I said, you don't go down to 1/60th of a second. Just add that flash just so you get 50% of the ambient light and 50% of the strobe, and it won't even look lit. So anyway, good. Dean's got it right. Way to go. Okay. All right, a few more here. Let's keep going. So the next one is... Next one is, what does HDR stand for? High dynamic range. B, high density ratio. High digital range. C is high dynamic range. Or D is high dew resistance. Which one you guys think that is? You guys are smart. You'll know that one. That was an easy one. Come on. I got to throw a couple easy ones in there. I mean, not everybody's an expert like you guys. So I don't know what high digital range is, and I don't know what high density range is. That's why I made that up. But I thought the high dew resistance was a pretty good one. So yes, the answer on that one, of course, is high dynamic range. You guys got that one right. Way to go. All right. The next one is, which camera did NASA leave on the moon? What camera are they using? A Canon, B, a Hasselblad, C, a Nikon, or D, a custom camera built just for NASA? Which one you guys think that was? So that was in 1969, I believe. C. Carl says C. Dean says C. It's a good guess. I hope not. Yeah. Yeah. Were you a cannon shooter, Dean? Is that the deal? Dean says, I hope so. He starts laughing. That's funny. Okay. All right. So the answer on this one is, what camera did NASA leave on the moon? This was actually Gene Cernan that left this one on. That one was, believe it or not, it was a Hasselblad. And you can see actually a picture of it here on his chest. I forgot the model number of this one. I was one of the electric, the 500 ELs or something like that had the electric winder. Yep. So says, I left my Hasselblad there with the lens pointing up at the zenith. The idea being someday someone will come back, find it, and how much deterioration solar cosmic radiation had on the glass. So anyway. And by the way, I apologize. I did it again. I skipped this one here. This is what we had before. We were talking about HDR. You guys got this one, so it's not a big deal. But the HDR, for those of you that are watching and not playing, is the ability to capture high contrast or multiple levels of contrast. So you can capture both the dark areas of the image and bring them up out of the shadows and get detail in there. And you also get detail in the highlights. What's cool, though, is modern cameras are getting better and better, and the high dynamic range is really getting phenomenal. There's some technology, I always get it wrong. I think it's organic sensors, maybe, where what they're able to do in the future is instead of a shutter coming down and exposing the film, they can actually expose a pixel at a time, and at the same time, I believe. And that, I think, will definitely change the ability to do high dynamic range, even right in the camera without doing bracketing. Right now, the way the process works is you typically will shoot more than one image. 3, maybe 5, depending on how much you want. 3 images. And what you do is you shoot a normal image, one overexposed or one for the highlights, and then shoot another one that's underexposed or one for the shadows. And then in software, you combine those together, and it eliminates the other ones that it doesn't need, and so it only puts those together and uses only the exposure ranges that it needs for that image to get the proper exposure. And so that's the way high dynamic range works. Sorry. Anyway, forgot to show you guys that one. Okay, we've got a couple more, almost done. And let's see, the next one is. The next one is, which of these elements are not part of the 7 elements of art? There's 7 elements of art. If you watch any of the shows I've been doing the last year, by the way, I mean, not year, 6 months at least, I talk quite a bit about this. So, is it bokeh, texture, color, or lines? Which of these is not part of the 7 elements of art? And Dean says A. Sue Ann says A. And let's see if you guys are right. Sorry, I'm not a very good singer. I gotta get us. That's probably copyrighted too. Probably trademark. Probably can't use that. Okay, so the answer on this one is the time is up. Yep. Okay, so our time is up on this one. The answer on this one is A. That's not part of bokeh. You could probably make a case for using it in one of the other categories, though. But you could say it could be part of space in a way. But the seven elements of art are lines, shape, form, space, texture, value, and color. And without having at least one of these in your photograph, there's really no such thing as art. And the thing I keep trying to explain to people, this is not like a rules thing or a rule of thirds kind of a concept. These are languages. These are very similar to the English language. Nouns, pronouns, verbs. They're used to describe a structure. They're a way to communicate a common language among individuals. And so these are tools that you would use to do the same in a visual language. They have meaning. Now, you may not know what the meaning is right now, but they have a meaning. So in other words, lines, a vertical line versus a horizontal line, the human brain interprets that differently. Our culture, our whatever society, a vertical line tends to subconsciously bring out strength. Okay, a wavy line, a curved line, tends to bring out softness or more feminine kind of approach. In other words, if you look at logos, if you're a logo designer or a graphic designer, these things, you're very, very familiar with these things. The reason is, so if you look at a bank, for example, or some kind of financial institution, almost all their logos are square or rectangular. They have sharp edges, and they're typically blue or something like that in that range, because that our society conveys that and interprets that as strength, stability. Okay. Look at fonts. You look at, Comic Sans, right? It's kind of a crazy comical font. That would not be the right kind of font for a logo for a bank, would it? But it would be maybe for a nightclub kind of a thing. So they're very important, and I've covered them many times and will continue to, but these are the things that are important to understand when you're talking about your photos and your images and creating an image that will convey. Okay? All right. So you better know that one, Sue Ann. All right. So the next one this is the last one. All right. It says, in 1979, what company invented the first autofocus SLR? A, Canon, B, Nikon, C, Boeing Aerospace, or D, Polaroid? In 1979, what company invented the first autofocus SLR? Any guesses, anybody? It's probably going to be a guess. Okay, Dean says it's D. Anybody else want to take a guess? That's okay. You guys don't have to. Again, it's kind of a tough one, kind of a trick question. Some of these, but one of the things I've learned about these things, it's interesting as I'm researching them to make sure I get the right answer. You learn a lot about what's going on, how the industry was developed, and actually there's a lot of controversy or at least conflicting information. So Carl says C, Boeing, which is a good guess, by the way. And Sue Ann says D, and Dean says he's thinking old instant cameras. So you guys are good. Dean, he's smart, man. Okay, it's Polaroid. Polaroid, believe it or not, developed the first autofocus SLR, single lens reflex, and it was in 1979. It was a Polaroid land camera. And I wouldn't think of this as an SLR because most of us think of an SLR as having interchangeable lenses, but that really means through the lens. In other words, you're seeing what the image is seeing right through the lens. It's not a rangefinder kind of approach. And so in 1979, it was Polaroid. If you guys ever wanted to read some interesting stuff, you know who was heavily influenced by Dr. Land? And that was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs thought Dr. Land of Polaroid was just an amazing guy, and learned a lot from him and his approach to business and his also approach to design. And when you think about it, if you look at this, this camera we're talking about right now, this is pretty innovative back then. First autofocus. I mean, come on. In fact, if you look at the image and you see this little right in the right-hand side on the front, there's a lens in the front. Obviously, on the left, there's a red button. That's the shutter button. The lens is in the middle. The button on the right, or it's not a button, it's actually a screen. It's an ultrasonic sensor. And what it would do is it would send out a signal, and it would bounce off, and that's how it would measure the distance, and that's how it knew to autofocus. So that's pretty innovative back in 1979. And yeah, I have one of these somewhere, probably behind me back here on my shelf somewhere, and pretty cool. And of course, the other thing was, is it had the batteries were in the film pack. So when you put the film in, you were changing the batteries every time, and so anyway, pretty cool design, pretty innovative for its day, even today when you think about it. So okay, all right. So let me go back one more thing I want to finish for you guys, and then I'll let you go. Again, let me just kind of go back and just, if you don't mind, remind you about the issue of storytelling, because again, it's very, very important, and I can't emphasize this enough, really. To talk about the story is really what photography is all about. Okay. I think week before last, we talked about, I had a quote about from maybe it was week before that. Anyway, from Tolstoy, who wrote War and Peace, and then basically his quote is saying, "Look, the job of an artist is to evoke emotion, good emotion, bad emotion, crying, sadness, some kind of emotion. If you don't evoke some kind of an emotion, then what's the point, right? It's just a snapshot. You just go, oh, okay, that's pretty cool." And the problem is nowadays we've seen so many of those snapshots, if you want to call them that we become desensitized, and there's no real emotion there. It's just a photo we've seen 1,000 times. Again, I look on Facebook and I see people posting sunsets, and they're like, "Oh man, that's beautiful." It's just a sunset. To me, I've seen it 1,000 times. There's nothing new about it, nothing unique about it, no different perspective on it, no story. It's really just a sunset, okay? It's more atmospheric than scientific than it is artistic. Now, the colors may be artistic, but that's not something you didn't have anything to do with, believe me. But, so, I think that the trick is to really focus more on learning to see and tell a story. These first two items are very, very important. Learning to see, what I mean by learning to see is I call it active seeing. Instead of just being in the world, instead of just being looking around, learn to see your environment. Look at light, especially. Lighting is the key to all photography. And so I'm always taking pictures even though I don't have a camera with me. I'm looking around. I'm looking for locations. I'm always trying to, that's a great, I need to come back and take a picture. That's a great, cool location. Need to bring a model there, whatever it may be. I'm trying to store those in my head. I'm always looking for photographs, no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, and I don't need a camera to do that. But the second element is to tell that story. Storytelling is the key to any photography. If you want to create a compelling image that draws people in, that if you're looking to do this as a business and you want to get them to hire you, it's all about telling a story. It's not easy. That's the hard part. The problem is it's like, oh, well, that's hard. Well, yeah, it is hard. So come up with a concept. Think about creating an image. Think about how to make an image, not take an image. That's the trick. So my friend, again, Frank Ruggles, who just passed away, master photographer in my opinion, he would make an image. His landscape work is phenomenal. If you want to, don't believe me, check it out. Frank Lee Ruggles, RUGGLES.com, frankleeruggles.com. His landscape work is just amazing. But if you knew Frank, he would wait there for days if it took. He was, I think, one of his favorite photos is some pictures of a boat, some boats on a lake. I think he told me he waited 3 days to get that, 2 or 3 days to get that photo. And that's what it takes. So that's all about making an image, not just taking an image. You don't just show up and go, oh, wow, look at that great scene. You may get lucky once in a while. In fact, you may want to go back and look at last week's show. Last week's show was an interview I did with Frank back in April of 2020. And he talks a lot about this. He talks a lot about seeing, talks a lot about when he started to see like an artist. He was a national parks photographer. And he is a great part of the interview in there where he talks about him wandering around, taking pictures like everybody else. And he was basically disappointed because it was raining and he'd gone up this really long hike and he couldn't see any pictures. There's just nothing there. And he looks down, there's just water droplets on these leaves. And it hit him. All of a sudden he saw something he'd never seen before. He saw the picture, pre-visualized it, and photographed it. And he said that was a turning point for him when he started to see like an artist and not just take pictures, but make pictures. So anyway, I encourage you guys to do that. Again, remember, we do photo reviews on the, oops, not that one. This is 9. So we do photo reviews on the first Monday of the month. Excuse me, not Monday. What am I saying here? First Friday of the month, right there in front of me. First Friday of the month, and we encourage you to submit your work. Just send it to review.photomentor.tv, and you can do that now. It doesn't have. Don't wait till the first Friday of the month. You can send a minute. I've already gotten some submissions already for next month, so go ahead and submit those in. It's all anonymous, no watermarks on the pictures, please, so we can do this. Again, it's not meant to show off your work. It's meant to give you some good, solid, professional feedback and to find out what's working in your photos and what you need to what maybe you need to improve on. And also, we'll look at it artistically and technically. It's not whether I like it or not. And it also does not matter whether or not you are a new photographer or you've been shooting a while. Love to have your work. So, all right. Hey, listen. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the quiz. Had some fun with that, and we'll continue to do that. Kind of come up with some questions and answers. If you have any thing you want to submit any questions that you need help with, go ahead and send an email to photomentor.tv. Be glad to answer those either directly. I'll reply, or I will reply directly, or we'll use them on next week's show. So anyway, listen, have a good weekend, and thanks very much. Enjoyed it. Hope you guys did as well.